Hello.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Anima Samashivan, representing Gaea Cynosure. I'm here to introduce Dr. Hussain Rangwala. He's a general dentist in Pune, India, with an experience of 11 years and has been practicing biomimetic. Achieved his mastership in biomimetic dentistry from Element Center of Biomimetic Dentistry and has been trained by David and Dave and other eminent masters from the institute. He has also got the privilege to learn from the biomimetic like Philip Quillman and Dr. Hugh Brown. He is passionate enough to take risks with the sole purpose of saving hopeless teeth from an early death. Over to you, Dr. Hussain Rangwala.
Um, Hello everyone. Hi.
Hi,
So
Doctor.
yeah. So my name is Hussain, and I recognize myself as a biomimetic dentist. I've been practicing biomimetic dentistry for the past 6 years now, and honestly, it has given me a spark rather than more than a spark. It's like a passion which has been ignited because the curriculum which we have. Uh, I'm sure most of you would agree that there are certain flaws in it, and we have been following it because everyone's following it. And we know that there is a flaw in the system, yet we continue doing that because we don't have an option. Like, what do we do next? Like, this is what has been taught to me, and I just have to do this. Okay. I don't have much time. I just have an hour given to me. I'm sure it's a weekday and a night time. So we'll just begin with the presentation. Okay. This presentation is an old presentation of mine, but I've incorporated quite a few things in it to make it as latest as possible. Okay. I'm sharing my screen. In case if you guys can't see, please type it in the chat and I'll be able to help you out. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Somehow can't see the
Yes.
comments. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So as the topic says, biomimetics, the natural shock absorption system of the tooth and how to mimic it. I'm sure everybody over here knows what biomimetic dentistry is. If you guys don't know, please enter in the chat. I can't seem to see the chat over here. Just give me a second though. Okay. Anyways, so today we are going to be learning about the natural shock absorption system present in the tooth. Now there are certain things which you already know. There are certain things which you don't know. Okay, so it might appear as somewhat shocking that okay these things are present in the tooth as well. These are discoveries which are like they were found out in the year 2007 roughly. Um, We'll begin. The first thing, biomimetic. Now, what do you understand by biomimetic? In this literal sense, it means mimicking the nature. Okay. Uh, for that, okay, it's just 1 minute over here on this particular slide. That when I say mimicking the nature, so every dentist over here is going to say that, okay, I do mimic the nature because you do actually mimic the anatomy. Here we are not talking about the anatomy, we are actually talking about the functional capacity that the tooth has. So there are certain things present in the tooth that gives the tooth its strength. Okay, and we have to basically replicate that. One thing which I need to clear: we in the medical fraternity are very different from the other doctors that we have. How do we differ? Is because most of the doctors, they rely on the body's healing capacity, but we as dentists, we are dealing with a structure which is actually which cannot reproduce because it's a product of the cells rather than cells itself. So when we have something like a product of cell, and the cells die eventually, so we have to basically replace that material by an artificial material. Okay, so we are not relying on nature. So the only thing that we could do is mimic it. So for mimicking anything, you need to understand what exactly that product is, the nature of it, the strength of it, the physical properties of it. So we'll be learning more on that aspect rather than the anatomy. This is Dr. David Alleman. So before I go to Dr. David Alleman, I'll tell you about how biomimetics was formed. Biomimetics basically is a combination effort of three major doctors, three important personalities. One, Dr. David Alleman, Dr. Pascal Manier, and Dr. Simon Delibri. Dr. David Alleman is based in the US. Dr. Pascal Manier is also based in the US, but he's basically from Switzerland. And Dr. Simon Delibri is in Italy. Now, it so happened that all three of them at the same time got different ideas which were aligning to a certain extent. Okay, and that's how biomimetic dentistry is there. Dr. David Alman, I consider him the father of biomimetic dentistry because he's the one who calibrated it, arranged it in a proper fashion to present it to us because it's a difficult topic to understand. Guys, in case if you're not understanding or following anything, please tell me. I'll go a little slow. Okay. How does Dr. David Alleman define biomimetic dentistry? It's restoring a tooth that is connected at 30 to 50 megapascal. This is a specific value over here. Top to bottom, side to side, and front to back. It's a bottom-up approach. We'll come to it in details later. This is Dr. Pascal Manier. I think most of us have read his books about the indirect restorations and all. Pascal Manier says that if we as dentists want to replace what has been lost, we need to agree on what is the correct reference. So in case if there's an artist and he's doing a still life, okay, so he needs to look at that apple and draw the apples. For that, the reference image is that apple over there, which is lying. If the painter cannot appreciate everything about that apple, he's not going to replicate it well. Okay, this scene is from the movie Matrix. I don't know how many of you know about this. It's one of my favorite movies. And here, one of the character, Morpheus, offers the protagonist a chance to know the truth. Today, here, I offer you a chance to know the truth about the truth. Either you can take it or leave the Zoom thing and go back to your original ways or the traditional ways. And I give you something which is actually going to change the way you work. Okay. We all know what enamel, dentine, and DEJ is. A brief overview: enamel being a very hard, wear-resistant material. It's highly mineralized, high in organic content. Low organic content becomes softer near the DEJ due to the high organic content present over there. It's brittle in nature. The microtensile strength is 10 to 30 megapascal. Enamel is the hardest material produced by the biological process. Now, this being aside, I always imagine enamel as a very hard structure. So, if I have to compare it with materials available in nature, I would always say that enamel is somewhat like granite. Okay, dentine. A dentine, on the other hand, is resilient and tougher than enamel. It's a hard structure, but it's much resilient, softer and more compliant due to high organic content. Mineral content decreases with depth from DEJ to pulp. Tubule size increases. Now this is really important. Okay, so tubule size near the DEJ is a little, the lumen is smaller as compared to the lumen which is near the pulp chamber. Okay, this is really important. Now, dentine is a complex structure which is similar to bone, and the microtensile strength lies between 44 to 105 megapascal. Why do we have this differentiation or this huge variation? Is because dentine is not just dentine. There's superficial, intermediate, deep. There is inner caries dentine, outer caries dentine. There are various different kinds of dentine present. Depending upon the area or the level where the dentine is, we have a different microtensile strength and the modulus of elasticity as well. Now, by weight and volume, the percentage of organic to inorganic, it's quite obvious. Enamel being enamel, it has a lot of inorganic content, very little organic. And dentine, on the other hand, has somewhere in between. Okay. Now, the most important thing, and that's the DEJ. Okay. Now, DEJ, first I'll just read through and then I'll try to explain what exactly DEJ does. DEJ holds enamel and dentin together at a microtensile strength of 51.5 megapascal. Remember, this value is really important. Okay. Collagen tendrils traverse from the dentin to the enamel, creating a natural fiber reinforcement. High surface area contact due to egg crater structure. Can you see this? Okay, this is how dentine is present, and it has these peaks over here and a crater-like structure. It fractures are typically deflected laterally. Soft zone between enamel and superficial dentine stress break. Okay, now in biomimetic dentistry, we don't consider DEJ as just DEJ, we consider it as DEC. That's dentino-enamel complex. Now, the dentino-enamel complex doesn't only comprise of the DEJ, but also the soft organic content, which is organic layer, which is present in the enamel, which is mostly composed of enamel spindles and all, and the mantle dentine, which is right beneath the DEJ. Now, this mantle dentine is also a soft, mushy zone. It's full of organic content. So basically, this entire thing acts as a buffer area. Now, before we move ahead, I'm going to give you an example and try to understand this. So in my old clinic, I think in every clinic we have this cabinet kind of a thing, drawers and all, and on top of that we have a piece of granite. Okay, even I had something similar, and the light above it went off. So I called the electrician, and he stepped on the granite. The moment he stepped on the granite just fractured. Okay. Now you would say that granite being such a hard material, much harder than the wood underneath it. Okay, yet the granite fractured. If you consider the other way around, if wood had been on top, would fracture? No, wood wouldn't have fractured because wood has that compliance in it. So I always compare enamel to be like granite and dentine to be like wood. Wood is more pliable, it can move about, has the flexibility, whereas the granite doesn't have that. Similarly, enamel doesn't have that. It has the all-or-none phenomenon. Either it will break or fracture or it will sustain. Whereas dentine can go on and on, sustain the pressures and ultimately break, much like wood. Now, why did the granite thing break? Okay, so if I go to think, had there been some buffer layer, like probably Fevicol that we have in India, I don't know if it's there in Dubai. So if you have Fevicol or something which is a buffer in the true sense. Now, what I mean by buffer in the true sense is that it will take the flaws of both. There are these two materials with different physical properties, one being absolutely brittle, the other being more flexible, pliable. Okay. So when there are these two different materials, when I add Fevicol to it, it compensates for the flaws of both. The DEC does exactly the same. It compensates for the flaws of the enamel and dentine in such a beautiful way that whenever there is some excessive pressure coming, it deflects the fractures. Can you see this? Fractures typically deflected laterally. So when there's a crack happening, okay, and it is about to pass through the DEC is going to take and deflect it more towards enamel or on itself, but it's not gonna. Have you ever seen any delamination happening, like the enamel, unless there is some actual abnormality, like if you have some issue, but otherwise in a natural, fully healthy person, you never find this enamel delamination happening. This is because of the DEC. I'm stressing a lot about DEC because we need to understand the natural structures, and only then we are in a space to uh, replicate them. Okay, this is a video. So here the tooth is subjected to hydrochloric acid, and you see that the enamel is basically getting dissolved. And what is left behind is this. Now, if you see this structure, this is how dentine is. And initially, so basically, you have a lot of concave structures. You don't have a lot of convex structures. You have something like this. And if I ask a carpenter to make a furniture for me, I'll always want the carpenter to make some blunt edges. some beveling. Why do I need that? Is because if there are any sharp edges, it's more easy to fracture that. Similarly, here you have these conical edges over here, and these are more easy to fracture, wouldn't it be? Now, these kind of structures also, are safe just because of the DEC. So you can imagine how important the DEC is. Okay. Now, the physical properties of the dental hard tissue, there are only two that we're going to look at. One is the modulus of elasticity, and the second is the ultimate microtensile strength of the structure. Okay. Now, dentine is in the range of 14. Actually, it's not 14, somewhere it's 8. So, somewhere it's 8, somewhere it's 14, somewhere it's 16, depending on which area of dentine you're looking at. And enamel is in the range of 60 to 87 gigapascal. I'm so sorry. And the microtensile strength, as we said, enamel is in the range of 10 to 30. Dentine is between 44 to 105. And the DEC is at 51.5 megapascal. Now, our aim when we try to replicate anything would be to reach this 51.5, because 51.5 at 51.5 the dentino enamel complex could match and fuse materials of different physical properties together. So whenever we are looking at bond strength, the materials that we use, okay, we want to achieve that particular value. If you are achieving that, then nothing like it. Okay. Am I going too fast? Are you guys understanding it? Please, if somebody could just answer. I can't have a look at the chats actually. Is everybody able to understand me? Okay, I'm going to move ahead. The dental enamel complex, I already explained to you. In this figure, you can see how the dental enamel complex appears as. Now, one very important thing to appreciate over here is this area. If you see this particular area and over here, you realize that the dental enamel complex in this area is thicker. Similarly, the dental enamel complex in this area is also thick. Okay, why would you have structures such thick? So we know that human beings evolve, like the appendix became redundant because there was no function for it. If there's something thick and something thin, there has to be a reason. So Dr. Pascal Mane did a research which is called as the finite element analysis of the tooth. This is from it, and he realized he subjected the teeth to forces, and he realized that there's a lot of stress accumulating in the central groove area and in the cervical area. Okay, so this particular experiment or the research indicated us or showed us that these are the areas where exactly the DEC is thicker, indicating that the buffer zone in these areas are thick so that it could compensate for the stresses which are occurring on the tooth. Now, this is another experiment done by Dr. C. White. So first, I'll just show you this particular diagram. In this, we can see the moire fringes. The moire fringes basically indicate the amount of stress. So there are two things that you need to see. One, that these moire fringes, the bands become thick near the DEC and then they taper down. So basically, there's a lot of stress accumulation over here, and then the stress is dissipated in the dentine area. Dentine being more like wood, it takes up a lot of stresses and dissipates itself. Okay, dissipates the forces. And the second thing that you need to understand over here or look at is these molar fringes are very close by in the cervical area and they're sparsely placed over here. What do these things indicate is that when the bands are very close, that means there's a lot of stress happening in the cervical area, and there's less stress in the occlusal part. Now, Dr. C. White basically he basically took sections 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter of the enamel DEC and the dentine and subjected to a lot of denting forces and realized that there's no delamination happening because of the DEC. That's what this experiment says. Okay, we'll move ahead. I'm sorry I'm rushing through. In case if you want me to go slow, I can. I have been given a very short period. So, are you guys with me? I need some answers. It's much better for me to understand. Are you guys with me? Okay, good. Fine. So we'll move ahead. Now, this is a very important thing. Now, before we move ahead, I'm going to be now starting with the shock absorption system present in the tooth. There are major two shock absorption system present in the tooth, and the other structures which are also there, which help the tooth in maintaining its form and function as well. One, we know of it. So I want answers from you. Can somebody tell me the one shock absorption system that everybody has studied in college? Quickly, quickly. Anyone can answer? A shock absorption system that we know which is present in the tooth. Okay, should I answer? PDL? No, PDL is outside the tooth, not the DJ to an extent, but we'll come to that. But something which you have studied in the college. Okay, I'll give the answer. So we all have done endo, like we do root canals and all, right? So what do we tell our patients that after root canal, what happens to the tooth? The tooth becomes like a weak structure. Okay, why do we say that? Because no, it's not the CEJ, ma'am. So because after root canal, we remove the nerves, okay, and eventually the tooth dehydrates and desiccates. So I'm going to show you an example. If I have this plant over here, okay, now if this is basically a dried plant and I try to bend it, it's going to crack. But a live plant, when I try to bend, it's going to pop up back. Now this happens because of water. So water is one essential shock absorber present in the tooth. Okay, even if you, now I stay in Pune is very close to Mumbai. So whenever we travel from Pune to Mumbai, on and there's a ghat in between, so you will always see these big tumblers of barrels of water kept. The reason that they keep this barrels of water is because if there's a speeding vehicle and it basically dashes into or is about to go into the valley, the barrel of water has that much of force, rather that resilient nature that's going to take up all the shock and not allow the vehicle to go into the valley. Okay, so that's what water does over here. I'm sure everybody knew about it. It's just that the perspective over here. Okay, now we're going to move to this particular topic. It's called as compression dome. Has anybody heard about compression dome? Okay, I'm going to move ahead. Compression dome. Now, look at this. This is Pantheon. Pantheon is one of the most ancient structure present. Okay, and Pantheon is nothing but a compression dome. Now, the compression dome is basically every piece is arranged in such a way that each and every piece of that structure depends on the other structure. Okay, so they're dependent on each other. Now, this is a sturdy structure. So it's been ages, the structure has remained. Similarly, teeth in the mouth also stays in the mouth for the longest of time because of this compression dome. Every part is arranged in such a way that they are dependent, codependent on each other. But the only flaw in this compression dome is that if you remove one piece, the entire thing is gonna collapse. Okay, where do we see a compression dome is in an egg as well. Now those who are in their homes and have an egg close by can try out this experiment. You can see it on my Insta as well. I can actually show it to you. One sec, I'll just show you that particular thing. So I'm going to share my screen again with something else. Can you guys see? This is my Insta page. Can you guys see the Insta page? Okay, so we did basically this experiment, and where's it? Yeah, this one. I think so. I can't hear this. Yeah. This is the one. Got an egg over here, and our dear friend, Mr. Nadeem Khan, is helping us out. He's a professional bodybuilder and he tried all his will to break the egg by placing a horizontal fashion in between his palms. And he couldn't. The only reason he couldn't do this, guys, is because the egg is a double compression dome. If you guys want to do this experiment at home, do it risk free. The egg is never going to break. When you hold the egg in a horizontal position and try to apply pressure, it is not going to break because of its geometry. Okay, so in the last reel we spoke about compression dome a bit. One second, I'm gonna shut this. Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, so basically what the compression dome does is basically gives it the geometry which can take a lot of forces. So when you hold the egg in horizontal pressure and apply pressure, not vertical, okay? You have to be careful. So it has to be horizontal. When you apply a lot of pressure, it's not going to break. The reason it's not going to break is because of just the geometry. It's eggshell. It's very thin. Yet it's not going to break. Okay. Something similar was even done in London. So what they did was, I'm going to share my screen again. Can you guys see this? 1 minute. Yeah. So they did this in London. They placed a Porsche on 4 teacups, and the teacups could basically take up the entire load. The reason why it could happen is because of the geometry. They are teacups, they're made up of ceramic and they can break very easily, but it could take that much of load, okay, just because of the geometry. Now similarly, the tooth is also a compression dome. The only reason the tooth can take so much of load, the way we eat, and also people have told, I'm sure everyone's My grandfather used to tell me that he used to break walnut kernels with his teeth. So I think everybody would have heard this. They could break that is only because of the geometry, and also of course the DEC. Okay. Now, have you heard your parents telling you as kids that in case if there's an earthquake or something of that sort, go and stand beneath a door frame? Now, why just a door frame or basically below a table? Because these are all called as compression arches, very similar to compression domes. And the compression arches, even in history, if you go to see these ancient ruins, you'll see that the arches always stay. The domes and everything, domes will stay, arches will stay, but the other structure is going to collapse. The only reason they stay is because of the stability that this particular geometry provides. Now, the tooth is basically a scissor arch, not just one compression arch, but two compression arch. So it is somewhat like this, like there's a uh, like this and like this. So there are two arches. It's like a scissor arch. I don't have a picture over here. Okay. So that is one structure that you came to know. Now, why is compression dome important? Because it gives it the strength. Now I'm again going to come to compression dome later on. I'm going to introduce you to another important structure that the tooth holds, that is a biorim. Now, what is the biorim? Is basically we saw in Dr. Pascal Magnet's research that the cervical part is really important. The cervical part basically gives the tooth its strength because of the thick DEC in that particular area. Okay, that is why it's called as a biorim. And in biomimetic dentistry, that is what we want to preserve. Why do we want to preserve that? Because that is the shock absorber, which basically gives the tooth a strength. Okay, so biorim is basically this area of the tooth, and biodome, which is the compression dome, is this upper part of the tooth. Now, both the structures are important. The biodome is also important because it has an integrity, and the biorim is important because it's one of the shock absorbers. So whoever said DEC in the comments, in the chats, they were absolutely right. It's the second shock absorber. Okay. I'm going to move ahead, and I want you to look at this figure. Now here, there is this particular point. I have split the tooth into two parts. If you see the upper part, it's mostly enamel, and major portion of it is enamel and little is dentine, and the lower part, major portion is dentine and there's a little bit of enamel. This is called as a sigmoid curve distribution. What do I understand from this is that here in the lower part, I have this area which is like wood, which is going to take a lot of stress. Secondly, I have the DEC over here. The DEC is going to act as my shock buffer. And third, we have a thin layer of enamel. Whereas over here, I have the compression dome where everything is together. But if I compare what is more important in terms of preserving, I will always come to the conclusion that the lower half of the tooth is more important than the upper half. So if this is the contact point, the area beneath the contact point is always going to be important. In biomimetic dentistry, we try to preserve this part. Okay, that's pertinent. That's really pertinent. Okay. So as I explained earlier, this is the biodome, this is the lower part is the biorim. Okay, is this interesting? Guys, is this interesting? Okay, good, good. Okay, now this my kid, when my kid was small, now she's grown up, she's 5 right now, but when she was a kid, so she love cocoa melon. I'm sure everybody who are parents out there know cocoa melon what it is. So I'm gonna play this rhyme over here. Now, so why did I show you the rhyme? Okay. One, I like cocomelon myself. It's too addictive actually. But the major reason why I wanted to show you this is that the kids basically are trying to build a compression arch. Okay. Now you have to understand that building compression arch is not simple. They tried a lot. And finally, when there was a system, a technique that they followed, that they could achieve this. Now that's what biomimetic dentistry teaches you. It shows you a technique where you can basically replicate what has been lost. Okay, so if there is a compression arch present in a tooth, where if there is a compression dome present, it is your moral duty to basically replicate that. But you need to know the technique. Okay, We're going to move ahead. I'm going to show you some furthermore structures. This is more related to the compression dome itself. It's called as a peripheral rim. Okay. Now, the peripheral rim is basically a concept which Dr. Tim Rainey came up with Dr. Graham Millicich. Okay, so I'm going to move ahead. In this picture, if you could see here, can you see at this particular point, this and here? So this basically, these are the points where you can see a proper segregation happening. That there's one layer of enamel which is going that way on the top, and the second which is more towards the periphery, or rather which is moving on the walls. Okay. Uh, so Dr. Tim Rainey and along with Dr. Graham Millicich, they found out these ridges. They are called as the subocclusal transverse ridges. Please write it down if you are carrying something to write. But they are also called as the Rainey ridges. What are these ridges? Basically these are invisible web-like structures. Okay, they are invisible web-like structures present in the enamel. They're not visible. Okay, and these structures basically hold everything together. That's how the compression dome is formed. Okay, so everything is together because of these ridges. Now these ridges run everywhere. Okay, and they represent somewhat like a wheel. So basically a wheel has spokes. Okay, so these ridges are basically like spokes. Okay, now what happens if you remove one spoke from a wheel? You'll not be able to run. The wheel is going to collapse. Even one spoke is off and the entire wheel is collapsed. Similarly, here as well, when you try to puncture the tooth, now this could be because of some decay, or you puncturing the tooth with an air rotor. Okay, the moment you puncture and you break this spoke, this ridge, which is invisible, you basically make the tooth vulnerable. Now, how was this proven? Is this experiment? I don't know if it's here. Okay, just like a tin can, I'll just explain this example. So if you have a tin can, okay, and you try to compress it, it's not going to compress unless you open the lid. So once the lid is off and you try to compress it, it will easily, it's just tin. But when not opened, when the seal is there, it's like a very tough thing to compress. The same goes with the tooth. The tooth, when intact, is amazingly strong. But if you remove one spoke and the entire thing starts collapsing, how? I don't think so. Here, there's an experiment. Okay, so Dr. Pascal Manet did this is again a research paper from Dr. Pascal Manet. Dr. Pascal Manet did a research on this, and what did he do was he subjected the tooth to pressure. Okay, and he found out that when normally, like no puncturing, nothing, a normal intact tooth, when subjected to pressure, the cusp move away at a distance of around zero point 0.3 sorry 2.9 microns. That's the exact value. 2.9 microns, that less. Now if you have an MOD and you fill it up with amalgam, and when subjected to a lot of pressure, this movement goes up to 167 microns. The diameter of a bacteria is 10 microns. So you can imagine, have you ever seen there are these fracture lines next to the amalgam? I think I have a few pictures. I'll just show it to you. Now, why does this happen? Okay, this thing, these fracture lines around amalgam fillings, this fracture lines around amalgam, especially in the proximal areas, like going towards the mesial or the distal aspect, right next to amalgam. Okay, this is called as a peripheral rim fracture. Why does this happen? Is because the tooth was one unit. You punctured it, you put something like amalgam, which is nothing but silver, which cannot bond to either sides. Okay, and when you have this structure lying over there, so when the forces come, initially the entire thing used to move together. Okay, trying to move away, but yet together. Now you have two structures over here where there's something in between which is not connecting them together. So when there's force coming, this moves differently, this moves differently. There's nothing to hold on together. Okay, that's what happens. And also there is loss of energy dissipation because the entire energy used to dissipate in the dentine. Now that is as well lost because there's no bonding. This side is different, this side is different. There's nothing which is binding them together. Is everyone with me? Are you guys understanding this? This is crucial. Are you guys understanding this? Okay, fine. So I'm going to move ahead now. Yeah, this is the experiment I was talking about. I'm sorry, this one. Okay, so this was also done by Dr. Pascal Manier. Okay, and as you can see, he subjected it to 150 newtons, the force, and the entire thing. If you go to see, can you see it on the right composite? How much is the widening and all? So if it's a single slot, amalgam would move like 5 microns, two slot by 5.4, but otherwise it will move to, okay, there are there are two researches. One says 180, one says 164. Either ways, the micron, the movement is too much. The cuspal widening is too much. In composite, it is 6.9, and without anything, it's 2.9. Yet, with composite itself, it's double. But here is exponential with amalgam. It's like crazy. I'm going to move ahead now. So, this experiment, Dr. Graham Millicich himself did. He used this bucket, he created two slots over here, nothing happened. But when he did an MOD kind of preparation and he stood up on this, the entire thing just collapsed. Okay. Now, this is cuspal flexure. So what happens, I've already explained to you what happens. There's movement, there's stress over here, and which leads to oblique cuspal fracture. I'm going to tell you why am I talking about amalgam, because right now we're not using amalgam anymore. I'll come to that. Why are we talking about amalgam? Now, in case if there is a fracture line, okay, so what are the symptoms that the patient presents with? The patient is always going to tell you that I feel some amount of sensitivity while biting. This is a classic sign of a crack present over there. Now, why do we have this scenario? Is because when there's pressure and there's a crack, so the thing is going to open up. There'll be fluid movement happening, the intrapulpal fluid, and when it pressure is released, it goes back. So every time there's pressure, there's opening, closing. This leads to sensitivity. Okay, how do we eliminate cracks? Okay, the only way to eliminate crack is to do a crown cutting, right? I think this was what was taught in college. I'm sure everybody has heard this from their mentors in college, that in case if there is a crack, what do? You basically place a cap. Would you think that's the right way? I've always compared dentine with wood. I'm going to go back to it. Dentine is like wood. So whenever there is a crack in the wood and you apply, like if there's a nail pierced in the wood, the more hammering you do, the crack increases. Can you imagine that? The same thing happens within the dentine as well. Every time there is a crack and you apply force, it's going to increase. So crown placement is not the solution to this. Okay, crown placement is not the solution. The only way that you can eliminate crack is by crack dissection. Now, for crack dissection, you need to have magnification. This is another kind of crack which is a standard thing. Every amalgam filling you remove, you can see this radiating kind of a thing, which is called as a Poisson effect fracture. This is a case done by me. Now, here is the answer. Why am I talking about amalgam? Because today we are not doing amalgam, but we're doing something called as white amalgam. Okay, this patient came to me. He had secondary decay. Everybody can see the secondary decay over here. This filling was not done by me. Okay, so when I saw this, I didn't shoot an X-ray. I just checked for vitality. The tooth was vital and I started removing. So here, if you can see, the decay is here. I started using my caries detector dye and I almost removed the decay. Okay, and then I found this crack line. Can you all see the crack line? Okay, I'll go back to the previous image. The stain is here, the decay is here, not here. But if you see in the next image, I saw this crack line and I realized that there's decay beneath the crack line. Had I not followed the crack line, I would have not reached it. I went furthermore and I saw this. Can you see this black area over here? And it was a huge decay. I would have totally missed it. Okay, obviously, if I would have taken an IOP, I would have got it. But this typical thing, okay, so this kind of decay is called as occlusal effect decay. It is right beneath the peripheral rim fracture, and it is basically bilateral. It is basically on both the sides equally, conical and bilateral. That's the sign of it. It's called as occlusal effect decay. And then obviously I filled it up. The solution is not a full crown. Okay, if not cracks, why would we place a crown? Okay, I'm asking a question. So you usually place, if not cracks, why would we place a crown? We usually place crowns after an endo treatment. Okay, and these are the reasons given to make it more functionally stable as a substitute for structurally weak tooth, aesthetics, etc. Now we're going to move a little bit towards the prosto part of it. Why? What are the kinds of Uh, Materials that we use. So metal, PFM, zirconia, these are common ones. Everybody's using them. Do we use in biomimetic? No. There's a reason to it. We'll come to that. What are the other materials which are available? There's lithium disilicate. That's Emax that we use for usually front anterior veneers. Sorry. There's HIPC. Has everybody heard about HIPC? I'm sure nobody would have. Lab people know, you guys don't know. HIPC is nothing but a polymer composite. It's a fiber material which is amazing, amazing material. Okay. And the last one is semi-deluxe with composite in own clinic. Okay. We have been using the traditional techniques for long to find these drawbacks. What are the drawbacks? There's leakage. Why is there a leakage? Because the luting agents that we use. Now, for example, I'm using a metal crown. Okay, so for metal crown, what is the luting agent that I'm going to be using? I'm going to be using either GIC or a resin cement. GIC takes 3 years for GIC to completely leach off. Okay, and the minimum gap that is there between the cap and the tooth is 10 microns. Easily, bacteria can go inside. I made a mistake. Bacteria's diameter is 1 micron, please. So at a single time, 10 bacteria can go from one particular site. Okay. Second reason, excessive force transmission. Now, what do you understand by this? Now, metal as a material has a microtensile strength of how much? It's 120 megapascal. Zirconia has a microtensile strength of 200 plus megapascal. The tooth has the microtensile strength ranging from 10 to 30 of enamel to 44 to 105 of dentine. But eventually, as an aggregate, we consider it as 53 megapascal. So when you have a low stress bearing structure and you place a high stress bearing structure on it, what happens to it? So every time there is force coming, especially a material like metal or zirconium, which transmits equal forces. It is a good shock absorber, no doubt, but it will transmit equal amount of forces to the tooth. Will the tooth be able to take it? So if you get an opportunity when a cap has been dislodged, please look under the magnification. You'll find a lot of cracks in the tooth. These cracks are a direct result of these load which the tooth comes across because of the metal cap or the zirconium cap. Okay. The resin cement, on the other hand, metal cannot fuse with resin cement because resin cement binds with silica. Metal does not have silica. Zirconium, on the other hand, has a very low content of silica. That's why it binds to it, but the bonding is not that strong because silica is not there. There's a very minuscule quantity of silica. So, no doubt. So, that's why these structures rely more on what? Physical retention. They rely on physical retention. We in biomimetic dentistry are more on the adhesive side. We are learning advanced adhesive dentistry in biomimetics. So when you're learning advanced adhesive dentistry, you're basically trying to eliminate the physical retention. I'll just give you an example. If there is a proximal surface which is damaged and you do a root canal, why do you have to replace the entire thing? Why do you have to do a full coverage? Why can't you just replace that part? We don't replace just the proximal part because we are scared. We are scared that this thing is not going to stay over there. We need physical retention. But today we have moved past. Do you know when was the cap cutting? Schillenberg's cap cutting principles were released in 1987. I was not even born then. They are so old. G.V. Black's principles were launched or released in 1896. We are still using those principles today. We have materials where physical retention is not required. G.V. Black's principle shows this undercut kind of a thing, the bottleneck thing. Why? Because it required physical retention. Because at that time they didn't have materials. Today we have materials where we can get an amazing bond strength. Amazing bond strength. If I'm not wrong, is Dr. Deepa Sadnani here? Because I can see Deepa's iPhone. I think that's Dr. Deepa. Doctor, is it you? She's my one of the student who just attended a workshop. So she realizes now that what exactly am I talking about. Anyways, I'm going to move ahead now. Iatrogenic decay on adjacent tooth because of poor lab in India. We have this issue. I don't know how is the scenario over there, and cracks that I already covered. Okay. Now we're going to move ahead. Leakage I already spoke about. Another force transmission. Initially, when we had these old cars, and we were very happy because the entire body was made up of metal. And why were we happy is because if in case if there was some kind of an accident happening, we were happy because the trauma left us with only a dent. Okay, and we could just repair it. Today, what's happening? The entire car is made up of fiber. Why do we have a fiber body out there? Because, and we are very unhappy with fiber because in case there's trauma, you have to replace the whole part. We can't just remove the dent because fiber crumbles completely. Why would the company do that? Not to save money. They're not doing for that. Initially, when there was a metal body of the car and there was an impact, the entire jerk used to come on the driver because the steering wheel, the driver used to get the entire jerk over here. Now, with the fiber body just crumples, so the jerk is not on the driver. That's the whole concept. That's the same concept that we work on. I'll give you another example. When we say, this is what I used to tell my patients because my teachers in the dental school told me this, that after root canal, the tooth becomes a weak structure. That is true. It becomes a weak structure. It takes 6 years for the root canal treated tooth to completely dehydrate. But, uh, but does the crown actually serve the purpose? So these are metal structures. The function of the cap is to protect the tooth. Now, if a company tells you that I have a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year warranty on zirconia crowns, but I can't guarantee that the tooth is going to be safe, does it make sense? In biomimetic, the entire principle is different. The principle is that in case of trauma, the helmet should break, but not the head. Similarly, in case of trauma, the structure, which is artificial, should take the load on itself, not the tooth. The tooth we're trying to save over here. That's what biomimetic is. We're trying to replace something, mimic it in such a way, making it more stable. Okay, I've already explained you the tensile in metal is 120 megapascal, zirconia is 200 plus. Tooth is in the range of 30 to 50. We look at as 53 megapascal. Lithium disilicate, which is Emax. I use this on a daily basis. So anybody who's telling you that lithium disilicate is a weak structure should use only in anterior region is right if you don't know the techniques. So I'll give you another example. We have tiling. Okay, if you take a tile, a porcelain tile, and try to bang it, it's going to break very easily. But if the same tile is kept and cemented on the ground, and you take a hammer and bang it, it's not going to break. It will crack, will not break. Because once bonded, ceramic stays very, very loyal to the structure which is bonded to. Lithium disilicate is pure ceramic. So once bonded right, it is going to last long, till 20 years as well, if bonded right. And composite, here we are looking at HIPC. HIPC is also composite, that's 50 megapascal. I'm not going to go into this pipe thing because it's too complicated for this time duration that we have. Because I need FAQs also. You guys have any doubt, please you can ask me. I'll in between check. Do you guys have any doubts till now? Anyone? Okay, I'm going to move ahead. I think this is catastrophic failure. This is what happens when you have a lot of weight on that particular tooth. Okay, one second. Now, in the cervical half of the tooth, where we have the biorim, this is the most important thing. This we need to conserve. Okay. This is a case done by me. Now I'm going to be presenting my cases. This is like one of my most early cases when I had not learned under Dr. David Alman. I had just seen cases. This patient came to me. He said he didn't want implants. And he said, can you save this tooth? I said, I can give it a shot. Okay, I'll just talk to you about my journey. Why did I do this? Okay, so I basically used to follow a lot of doctors on Instagram. It's like around 6, 7 years back, and I came across this doctor, Dr. Tadfi. I don't know if you guys follow him. He's based in UK. Does amazing cases. Okay, and I saw this case wherein there was this root stump remaining, nothing else, just a root stump. Okay, and he created a flat structure on it, just flat, and he placed this prosthesis on it. And he said that voila, done. I thought either this guy is fooling himself or fooling us because this thing's not going to last. Or he's just doing it for Instagram, probably. So that made me think about it. I started researching. I came across biomimetic dentistry. That's what he did. Okay. Now I'm going to show you my case, what I did. So this was the initial scenario. Sorry for the photography. I was not that great during that time. It's like a really old case. I tried to isolate it. I was successful in it. If you look look carefully over here, this is beneath the gums. This is the gum height. Can you see that? This is the gum height and beneath the gum level. Isolation was achieved and I removed all the cracks and everything from it. And I created something called as biobase. A biobase is basically something which is solid and which is receptive to adhesive restoration. Okay, so I created a biobase again flat. I tried to mimic him. And I basically place this lithium disilicate, which is Emax. This Emax crown on this. Okay, and it's been 6 years. The tooth is still intact. There are only two molars in that area because if you could see in this picture, the other teeth have gone. So this is the 7 and this is the 8, which also has a cap on it. Okay, so this is still intact. Nothing has happened. Lithium disilicate. Nothing happened. Okay. I haven't explained to you the pipe thing, so I'm not going to go here. Okay. Now, many times there will be a scenario, and this is also pretty common. I'll tell you the reason. It's not your fault because so what happens is that the patient comes to you, you take an IOPA, and you realize that okay, it's approaching the pulp. It's not there. It's approaching the pulp, but very close. And you tell the patient is going for a root canal because you know for a fact that if it's a deep filling, it's eventually going to go for a root canal. The patient has no pain, okay, no, just sensitivity. Okay, somebody's asked me a question, with what did you make the biobase? Okay, I'm going to get to that. Just give me a little minute. I'm going to be showing an entire case how the biobase is made. So we'll get that. Okay. So I'll get back to this where I was. So in that particular scenario, what our teachers taught us was using calcium hydroxide, Theracal, etc., which honestly doesn't work. So what do we do in these scenarios? We do this. So there's a patient, a young chap, he was around 14 years old when he came to me, 14, 15 years old, roughly, and so badly decayed. But the tooth was vital. Okay, the tooth was vital. I removed the decay. This is again a very old case. Today, I would not go this deep. Okay, there's no pulp exposure. This is that pink layer with no pulp exposure. Okay, the tooth was still vital. And then I created this biobase. At that time, I was using a different kind of fiber. So if you could see these traces of fiber over here, these marks, can you see? That's the fiber over there. So I'll answer the question, what is biobase made up of? The biobase is basically made up of immediate dentine sealing is done. Okay. And then we place a layer of fiber, which is mimicking the DEC. And then we place a layer of composite on it. And then again, we'll place a layer of flow. Okay. And that's what the biobase is. So I created a biobase. This is the biobase. And then this was made in my clinic itself. Okay. This is pure, like normal composite that we do. And we cure it in a different way. We cure it for 8 minutes at a very high temperature. So that every bond. So you need to know this, that whenever you cure it with a light, only 60% of it is cured. The remaining 40% is not cured. When we heat it at a very high temperature, you get that 85% of curing happening, 15% still remaining. So you get a solid piece of composite. And then I placed it. Okay, this is another case. So you create something called as a peripheral seal zone. The peripheral seal zone is basically an area. So this is the first image. The second one is I'm using the caries rotating dye. The caries rotating dye basically helps us in identifying which area is decayed and not. Okay, and then we only remove the peripheral seal zone and basically create a peripheral seal zone wherein there's no bacteria. Okay, so here I have created a peripheral seal zone and the central stop zone is where I stop. Okay, now there was another research in 2010 which clearly showed that in case if there is bacteria present in the central area, but you have a hermetic seal. Now, when can you achieve a hermetic seal? When you are doing the procedures under rubber dam, okay, and you know the techniques, you're doing proper bonding. Okay, so when you have that, so this particular bacteria in this area doesn't get oxygen, it doesn't get food, so eventually it's going to either stay dormant or it's going to wither away. Now bacteria produce acid only when they multiply, so there'll be no acid production, no more further damage to the tooth structure. You can leave this like this. It will stay good for 20 plus years. Nothing's going to happen. I've been doing it for the past 6 years. Nothing happens. The tooth does not go for a root canal. Okay. So that's how easily you can save a tooth going from a root canal. You don't reach that area. You let that bacteria there. Provided you have a hermetic seal. If you have proper rubber dam isolation, and if you have cleared the periphery free of bacteria, excuse me, sorry, you have the bacteria free zone in the periphery, then that tooth is going to stay well. That's biomimetics. You're going to preserve tooth structure. We want to preserve these structures. Once endo treated, you can't do anything. The tooth becomes a dead structure, brittle in nature, dehydrated, more vulnerable to all these fractures. Okay, we're going to move ahead. Now, what is essential for this kind of dentistry is two things. One, you need to see. If you can't see things, you can't work on it. So loops, magnification is important. Microscope, amazing. Okay. And second is isolation. However good your isolation is, without rubber dam, it's of no use. I always give this example. If you buy a new vehicle, a car, and it might give you a mileage of around 30, the company claims that the mileage is like around 30, 35. But when you actually put it on road, you realize that the mileage comes up to 20, 25. It's not that the company is lying. The testing has been done in an environment which is absolutely perfect. It doesn't have potholes, traffic signals, etc. So I give the example that similarly the company that we use, company gives us certain values that this material is of this much strength, etc. When can we achieve those strength? When we get a lab-like environment. When the environment is free of humidity from the mouth, saliva, blood contamination. Only then we can get a lab-like environment. Then we can get the same values what the company is promising you. And how can we achieve that? That can be achieved only with a rubber dam. Without that, you can't achieve it. So how much ever you convince yourself that I'm isolating it with cotton rolls is not going to help you. You have to isolate with rubber dam. Now there's a fear of rubber dam. I have a video. So as a bonus, you guys get to see a tiny masterclass of how to use rubber dam in a practice. Just a few armamentarium, and you can easily practice rubber dam in a practice. It's not difficult at all. Like people who are saying that okay, it's not happening, try these techniques, it's going to work. I'm going to show you the video at the end of this presentation. Okay, we're going to move ahead. The 6 lessons approach of Dr. Haleman. Now this is important. Why? This kind of dentistry is difficult. We have different areas. We have superficial dentine, intermediate dentine, deep dentine, inner caries dentine, outer caries dentine, where every kind of dentine will have a different propensity or different kind of affinity towards the bonding agent. So how do we manage that? Now, Dr. David Alman coined this term called as hierarchy of bondability. What do you mean by hierarchy of bondability? Is like enamel will have a different affinity towards composite. Superficial dentine will have a different affinity or inclination towards composites, intermediate, deep. So whenever there is composite placed on these different layers, so everyone is going to try to pull it towards itself. Enamel is going to pull it towards itself with more force because it has more affinity as compared to dentine. Am I right or am I wrong? Does enamel bond better than dentine? How many say yes? Okay. Uh, okay, somebody has asked me what if the dentine still survive. I'll get to that later. Okay, enamel. So Naima Shakil says that yes, enamel bonds better. Nihal says no. Everyone, please, please, I want your participation. Tell me, does enamel bond better than dentine or no? No. Okay, who all are saying yes? No, no. Okay, so people are saying that dentine bonds better. Priyanka saying enamel bonds better. Janisha says enamel bonds better. Fatima says enamel bonds better. Bonds better. Okay, I'm gonna ask you one question. Okay, I'm gonna trick you all. Veneers. When we do veneers, what do they say? That the veneer has to be restricted only to in enamel. Why? because they believe that enamel bonds better. Am I right or am I wrong? Quick. So, okay. So people are changing their answers. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a secret. Those who are teaching enamel veneers, basically, even they don't know this. Okay. Dentine can bond better. And I have research papers. I'm not claiming that. There are research papers done by plenty of doctors. Okay, somebody has mentioned IDS. Nice. But what does IDS do? We'll come to that also. So dentine bonds better than enamel. Why is it so? The only thing is that dentine takes time to mature. So initially, when you subject the composite and it is presented in front of enamel, and then of course enamel is going to snatch it away. Enamel is strong, but if given time, okay. So I give this example. If there's a tug of war between me and my daughter is 5 years old. Okay, so who's gonna win? Of course, I'm gonna win. But if I give my daughter time that she grows up to 30 years from now, okay, and she's my age, so then there'll be a tough competition, right? I stay constant, okay? My age doesn't change. So there will be a tough competition. Okay. So now this scenario, so we basically need to give dentine that opportunity to mature. With techniques today, we can help that. IDS is one of the technique, not the entire technique, but yes, immediate dentine sealing can change the dynamics to an extent. Okay, to a major extent. Okay, so what did Dr. Alleman do? Dr. Alleman basically compiled all the data. Yes, you're right, decoupling with time. So Dr. Rajesh has read quite a few things, and you're absolutely right. It's decoupling with time. We need to give time for the dentine to mature. Okay. Now, what did Dr. David Allman do? Dr. David Allman basically compiled everything, and he created a pathway that you follow these protocols. Simple. Just follow these protocols, and then you're going to reach the values that we want. You're going to reach that 51.5 megapascal. 51.5 megapascal with dentine. And with enamel, the maximum you can get is 28 megapascal. Maximum is 28 with enamel. With dentine, you can reach up to 51.5. Some research also shows 60 plus megapascal. Okay. So we're going to look a little bit about the 6 lessons of Dr. David Allman. The first one is diagnosis and treatment of caries. The second is diagnosis and treatment of structural compromises. Third is immediate dentine sealing and resin coating. Fourth, which is absolutely important, C-factor management and placement of fiber. Fifth is enamel preparation and onlay design. And the last one is occlusal adjustment. I'm going to talk a little bit in brief. I'll just check the time. It's more than an hour. Are you guys okay with it? Is it interesting? Should I continue? No answer. Should I continue? Okay. Okay. So we're going to move ahead. The first one, diagnosis and treatment of caries. In this particular lesson, we basically, okay, tell me honestly, what is the ideal function of a dentist? The ideal function of the dentist is to get rid of the decay. Okay. Now, what does this lesson teach us? Is basically that if I am working on a patient and I'm using a spoon excavator. Okay. So, and my daughter is also using probably. So, how much force am I going to apply, and how much force is my daughter going to apply? Is it going to be the same? Of course not. It's not going to be the same at all. Okay. So, there will be a difference between how much of decay am I going to remove and how much of decay my daughter is going to remove. Similarly, everyone will have a different strength in their hand. Okay. So, they're going to remove different. And how do you actually gauge? Because that was what was taught in college, that there's soft tissue, remove it. Somebody mentioned that if there's soft dentin, what do we do? The ideal answer is, if it's not decayed, you let it be one. Okay. If it's in the periphery, you remove it. But if it's in the central stop zone, you let it be, because it is going to give you bonding. How it's going to give you bonding? That's too much in detail, but understand that it has more organic content in it. And the kind of bonding that we're looking at, we want that organic content to be there. We want collagen to be there. We want calcium ions to be there. So that's not going to cause major impact. But if you remove that, what is going to happen? You're going to remove good tissue. Why am I saying this? Is that in the initial few slides, I did mention that the lumen of the dentine is bigger near the pulp chamber, and the lumen of the dentine is smaller as you go towards the DEJ. So as you go deeper, it becomes more organic dentine. It is going to be soft. So when you try to remove it, you're going to remove healthy dentine tissue as well. Okay. The second is structural compromises. So there are these four red flags that you need to look at. The first is the isthmus width. The second is the cuspal width. The third is if there are any cracks. And the fourth one is the height, how deep you're going. Anything which is below 4 millimeters is like a highly compromised structure. Anything which has too much of a thick isthmus width, that means the cusp are thin. So that leads to structural compromises. The third one is immediate dentine sealing. Now, immediate dentine sealing is nothing but you coat freshly cut dentine with a bonding agent and a resin coat. Resin coat means flowable, a composite flow. So, what does this do? Is basically it preserves the tissues. It preserves the tissues. It does not let it dehydrate. This is usually used after crown cutting. So, this was also proposed by Dr. Pascal Manier. Dr. Pascal Manier has even mentioned that the bonding capacity increases by 300%. Can you imagine 300% just by doing immediate dentine sealing? If you're using resin cements for luting, and if you have done immediate dentine sealing, you'll get an amazing bond. You can't remove these kind of prostheses just by doing immediate dentine sealing. How do you do it? When you do crown preps, I don't advocate crown preps. We do something called as only an overlay. But in case if you're doing it over there, you just use the bonding agent, cure it, apply a layer of flowable, and then you take the and then you do the oxygen inhibition layer. I'm sure everybody knows what oxygen inhibition layer is, and then you take the impression. Okay. The fourth is C factor. Now this topic is a huge topic, a very important topic. C factor basically is the ratio of the bonded to unbonded surface. I think everybody knows about this, the ratio of bonded to unbonded surfaces. But what do you exactly mean by that is that it shows you the affinity of certain materials. So when you have like a class 1, class 2, class 3, so the competition over here is a lot. Now, how do I explain this? In case if I have a box, I have this. Okay, so it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides to it. Any object has 6 sides to it. So in case of a cavity, a class 1, it will have 6 sides. So 5 sides are tooth, and one side is open, which is not bonded. So the bonded composite has to fight amongst 5 sides. There's pull here, pull there, pull there. How do you manage that? That is what C factor management is. Okay. And also, most important is the hierarchy of bondability. Every area is going to have a different kind of affinity towards that material. So how do you nullify that? You have to create an area where everything is at the same level. Basically, like removing the caste system from the country. So everyone is at the same level. How do you get that? That's what C factor control is. You do it by decoupling with time. You give dentine enough time to mature. Once dentine is matured enough, then it can receive it as well as enamel, or rather better than enamel. Okay. And what does fiber do? So we basically use ribbon a lot in our practices. Ribbon is basically the substitute for your DEC. It is that uh, crack deflecting structure present within the filling. Okay. The last is enamel preparation and onlay design, where you learn how to prep the enamel and create the onlay design. Now, honestly speaking, when you do look at a case, okay, so initially you start with lesson number 1, 2, and 5. Your plan has to be ready. So lesson number 5 though is at the 5th level, but you start doing with 1 to 5. It's a little bit complex over here to explain. But what I'm trying to say is that your picture, your future, what you're going to do in that particular case has to be very clear that I'm going to do an only design in it. That's how you're going to prep it initially itself. And the last is occlusal adjustment. Okay. Now, what is biomimetic dentistry? It is eliminating infections and cracks in dentine. Sorry, I went a little. It is immediate dentine sealing. to preserve pulp vitality, bonding the tooth front to back, side to top, side to side, top to bottom. Now, this is important. Here, we are not looking at enamel, like you're not working as in amalgam. You want all the cusp to be one unit. Okay. Now, you remember I said that white amalgam, when your bonding is not good, so any composite filling acts as amalgam. That stress dissipation is not happening. How do I show this? So I'll show you this video. One second, I have to stop this sharing, and I'm just gonna answer your questions. Okay, I just saw the questions right now, but first I need to show you this video. Okay, one sec. It's a beautiful video. This was done by a research from Dr. Tagami. Dr. Tagami is one of the pioneers. He got certain materials. Okay, what was done over here was this is a cavity which was filled by bulk fill. Why was a bulk fill used? Because enamel and dentin are bonding together over here. And this thing was subjected to a curing light. And there, did you guys see that? Did you guys see this? So this basically is nothing but the composite being lifted up. That happened because there was more affinity towards the enamel. So that entire composite lifted up. Now this was because the hierarchy of bondability was not managed. The C factor was not managed. Okay. We're going to move back to the presentation again now. Okay, bonding the tooth to front to back, bonding the tooth front to back, side to side, top to bottom, lowering stress and strain. Okay, and matching the tooth functional anatomy. That's the last. We are not worried about the anatomy that much, though there should be enough anatomy for the function to be there. But the main aim of biomimetic dentistry is all of these. Okay, I always tell that you can't put biomimetic dentistry into the category of endoresto. It's all over. You can prevent implants by treating like really grossly affected teeth. You can prevent root canal. You can prevent uh, extraction that I said already. So it encompasses many and prostho. Like you don't do caps, you do only an overlay because your adhesive game becomes so strong that you don't actually require to rely on physical retention. Okay, I'm going to move ahead. Now, this I already said the order of the treatment is lesson number 1, 2, and 5 together. Then you move on to immediate dentin sealing and resin coating. Then C factor management, decoupling with time and fiber placement, and only cementation is later on, lesson number 5, and then lesson number 6 of the adjustment. Now, this paper. Okay, so this paper is by Urabe. He said that novel resin bonding systems have the tensile and cohesive strength of the DEJ. Why the DEJ specifically? Because it is what binds to different materials of different physical properties. Okay, at 51.5 megapascal. So accordingly, these materials have sufficient bonding performance. Today, we have these materials available which can mimic DEJ, but new principles for restoration should be established. We can't work with the principles what has been taught in the curriculum. Like if your professor in college said that you can't bond composite to composite, that's utter rubbish. When you're doing immediate dentin sealing, you are creating a layer of composite, and then you expect the resin cement to bind or bond with composite. So there is composite to composite bonding happening. Okay, so there are many misconceptions because our professors also never knew in college. This was never taught to them. A few of my cases, a simple class 1. The class 1s are the most difficult because it has the highest amount of C factor. Okay, so Katie's detecting dye, cleansed it. Then you bevel the enamel to an extent. Here I have placed fiber. I don't know if you can appreciate it. Ribbon basically almost becomes invisible after, and then the final. Dental outcomes, there are 3 dental outcomes: biological, clinical, and Catastrophic. So I have already shown you a picture of catastrophic failure, how it is. Biological, when the clinician knows what the problem is, like if there's secondary decay happening, but the patient says, I have no issues. Clinical, when the patient knows that there is a problem. And the third one is catastrophic, when there's nothing that you can do about it. These are usually the three outcomes. Okay, a few of the cases. So here, if you see why this particular image is because I want you to appreciate the cracks. Can you see the crack over here? Usually you would have just missed it. There's a crack here. There's a crack here. Okay. So that is why we eliminate these cusps. We don't like eliminating the cusp unnecessarily. In adhesive restoration, the maturing bond center dentine is in competition with developing shrinkage cells. This is a very complicated topic. I'm going to skip this topic right now. It's very interesting, but not in this lecture now. Okay. This is a vital tooth, which I saved. Okay. This was how the pre was. Caries didn't die. I cleared the periphery free. Okay. You might say that there's a little bit of green. Now there are shades of green. Okay. So there are certain greens which you can leave behind. Biobase, immediate dentine sealing, fiber reinforcement, and then I built it up with direct composite. And this is how it finally looks like. However bad the scenario is, you can treat it. You don't require endo treatment. This is a book which everybody must have read it in college, Bonded Porcelain Restoration. This is by Dr. Pascal Manier. He has a major contribution in biomimetic dentistry. Now he says is that the biomimetic principle, that is the idea that the intact tooth is the guide to reconstruction. Now that is your reference point. Is in sharp contrast to the porcelain fused to metal technique, that is the metal or PFM, in which the metal casting with its high elastic modulus makes the underlying dentine hypofunctional. What do they mean by this? Is the casted metal has a high uh, modulus of elasticity. More modulus of elasticity, so less is the bending capacity. Now the dentine is quite pliable; it can move, but when you have a cap placed on it, so it restricts the movement of the dentine, which makes it hypofunctional. So what should be the function of the tooth or the dentine? It's restricted by these caps. Okay. Another case of mine: isolation, ribbon placement, biobase, and then this is a semi-rigid created in your own clinic. So even if your lab does not support you, you can create your own semi-rigids in your own clinic very easily. It takes less than 5 minutes for this thing. Less than 5 minutes. Okay. Okay, maybe with experience, but yet this is another case of mine. This is an endo-treated tooth, really badly damaged. So I basically removed that particular cusp over here because it was too thin. Now today I would have eliminated this cusp as well. These are my old cases. I created a biobase and then I placed again a semi-rigid onlay which is created in the clinic. And the best part is, if you look over here, it's seamless. So you can't basically identify. You don't have these overhangs over there. Now I am going to answer your questions. Okay, so I'll go back. All caries removal require acid etch before. Okay, all caries removal. No, you don't remove everything. You remove only the periphery. Okay. Acid etch before immediate dentine sealing. So that depends on the bonding system that you're using. I use the fourth generation bonding system, which has a prime separate and a bond separate. So I am not going to use acid in my cases. Also, the DEC is the most important thing for me. So Dr. Philip Killemans, he also teaches biomimetic, he conducts workshops by the name of Mimetic. I don't know if you know about it. He calls the DEC as the holy grail. You have to protect it. You can't. And if even a single drop of acid goes on that, DEC is going to destroy it. So there are ways, however, how to use the acid. It's a little complicated. The elements came up with this technique. It's a little complicated, but yes, you can get a good bond strength with that as well. But if you're using something like OptiBond FL, so which is again a gold standard bonding agent, I use Clearfill SE. which is again a gold standard bonding agent. So if you're using Optibond FL, which is again a fourth generation bonding agent, in that you do use acid. Do we need to acid etch? Okay, it's the same question. If it's near the pulp, I don't. You can never do complete etching. It can be only self etching, that too in a particular way. Okay. Next is how do I go down? Ribbon placement before or after IDS? It's before. Okay, it's after IDS, but before biobase. So both are different things. Okay. And so those who are leaving, are people leaving? There is a video right now for the rubber dam. Do you guys want to see it? Okay, there are very few fibers that we use. Ribbon is one of them. Inod is one of them, but the others we don't. It has to be polyethylene fibers, not glass fibers. Placement of drop of flowable composite before packing it packable. Not a drop, but a thin layer of flowable. What is biobase? Biobase is basically a combination, is basically a receptive surface which can take up the prosthesis. And we are looking at non-retentive prosthesis. So biobase would be something which can create ionic bonds. So it is composed of the immediate dentine sealing, the fiber placement, composite, and again a flow. Okay, that's biobase. Okay, now I'm going to share my video again. Uh, just give me a minute. I'm going to shut the chat right now. One sec. This is a 10-minute video. Hey guys, today will be. And I'm sharing it right away. Yeah. Talking a little bit about rubber dam. It is a short master class which is gonna make you equipped enough to practice rubber dam in your practice if you want. We'll start with a little bit of the armamentarium. The first armamentarium that you see is the rubber dam frame. The next one is the rubber dam forceps, and next to it is the rubber dam punch. Now, in my practice, I just use 3 types of clamps, and these are enough for me, starting with B4, W2A, and W8A. Now, these 3 clamps are enough for you to do most of these cases. We'll be starting first with placement of the rubber dam sheet on the rubber dam frame. Make sure it's taut enough for that little bit of pressure when you punch. I don't use a template. Basically, what I use is the teeth itself to mark. I use a permanent marker, and for the posterior region, you'll be clamping. Even if you're working on the first molar or the premolars, you'll be clamping the second molar or the first molar. So that will be taken care by the W8A clamp. In case if it's a single tooth isolation for a premolar, then you use the W2A clamp. As said earlier, I use my teeth as reference and I mark the teeth. Here we are going to be isolating from the second premolar, from the second molar to the first premolar. So I'll mark them, and I'll be explaining a little bit about the rubber dam punch right now as well. So as you can see, this is the rubber dam punch that I use, and there are multiple holes out there. The biggest one, we'll start with the smallest first. The smallest hole is for the mandibular incisors and the maxillary incisors. The one next to it is for the maxillary incisors specifically. The one next to it would be used for the canine and the premolar. The next one will be used for molars, and the final one would be used for your clamped molars or class 5 cases. After we have punched, we're going to be using the W8A clamp over here to clamp the second molar. Okay, and this technique that I'm using is called as a parachute technique. What I'm going to be doing is through the holes partially, I'm going to pass the clamp, as you can see over there. So the beaks of the clamp are on the opposite side, and the upper arched part is on the side where you're going to be actually using the side of the rubber dam that you're going to be using. Okay, you pull back the rubber dam sheet, only exposing the beaks. Okay, And this looks like a parachute. We'll be using a rubber dam faucet, engaging the rubber dam faucets in the holes provided in the clamp, and then we're going to be putting it on either side of the tooth, the buccal and the parietal or lingual. Now, once we realize that it's stable enough, we pull the rubber dam sheet over it enough to expose the tooth. Once at this stage, I usually frame it. Right now for the demo, we are not framing it. Okay. Then I start with the last tooth. So that will be the first premolar, last tooth as in from the other end. And I'll be using a floss to make sure that the rubber dam is completely passed through the contact areas. I'm using a Teflon sheet over here so that it's more visible in the video, but you ideally use a Tetra floss. Okay. In case if you can't isolate or can't pull back, so I take use of my assistants, and I use two plastic instruments to hold the rubber dam in place on either side, and then I floss it, ensuring that the rubber dam passes through the contact area. Again, here, when we are clamping the first molar, I'll be using my assistant's help, making sure that the rubber dam is in place, and then use the floss to pass the rubber dam. Once you're sure that the entire thing is clamped well and everything is isolated, you're going to be making sure that there's inversion. In case there's no proper inversion of the rubber dam, you use a plastic instrument. You can even use a floss in the contact area and move it left and right so that there's proper inversion happening. Also, you can use a 3-way syringe for the same. In case when you want to expose the cervical area furthermore, you can use your B4 clamp in those areas so that there's proper retraction of the rubber dam. Now we'll be showing you methods. This what we're doing right now is creating a floss tie. Now what exactly is a floss tie? Is something which would help retraction in case if you don't have a B4 clamp. Okay, you take the floss tie in this fashion and then pinch it between two fingers and create a knot. This is the first knot. Once this knot has been created, you take both your fingers again within that knot and repeat the process as shown. And now you're going to join the first knot and the second knot together. Okay. Once you have both the knots together, what is created is a nose which is so good enough and amazing to retract in cervical areas, also when there are just root pieces left. And when you move your hand left and right, you can easily create that retraction and tighten the nose. We're doing the same thing again. The first knot, open it up big enough for your fingers to pass in it again, and then you join both the fingers again and create one more knot and join both the knots together. Now in the anterior region, I don't use any clamps. Okay, so I basically put the rubber dam on the frame, make it taut enough, and put it on the teeth for reference, mark all the teeth, incisors including, and the canine. So here we are going to be isolating the anterior area from canine to canine, and we're going to be using no clamps in this particular scenario. Once we've marked, we're going to punch and you're going to be first starting with the last tooth, that will be canine in this case scenario. You're passing the rubber dam over there. In the mouth, if it's a little difficult, you can use your assistant's help and hold it with two instruments as shown earlier. And then you're going to be flossing it on either side. And instead of the clamp, you're going to be using something else. You'll be using a piece of rubber dam itself. So this is a piece of rubber dam. You push it between the two teeth, the canine and the first premolar, and let it be there. It looks like a bow, and it's going to make sure that the rubber dam stays in place. Similarly, we'll be isolating the other teeth, the lateral, the central, and flossing in between interdentally. Once you have the other canine isolated as well and flossed well, you're going to be using one more piece of rubber dam, and then you're going to make sure that there's proper interaction with the help of it between the canine and the first premolar. Proper inversion can be achieved with the help of a plastic instrument. Now, in case if you want cervical exposure like a class 5 or something, you can use the floss ties in these case scenarios. Also for composite veneers, this technique works brilliantly, and you can expose it right to the cervical margin. You're going to hold with one instrument palatally, ensuring that it reaches till the base. And then you're going to move your hands left and right, tightening the nose. The left and right movement is imperative, okay, and it can create a proper tight nose. This is going to make sure that the rubber dam is retracted well in that area. Rubber dam basically is forehand dentistry. Using the help of your assistant's hand is important in many cases where isolation is difficult, especially in deep margin elevation, as well as in these cases. Can you see the difference? The cervical exposure on the upper right central incisor and upper left central incisor. I hope this video helped you guys. Thank you. Now, guys, we are at the end of this thing, and I would like to tell you a few things. The whole purpose of this this webinar. Okay, there are a few questions. Just give me a minute, and then I'll answer those questions. The whole purpose of this webinar was that we are coming to Dubai. So Dr. David Alleman's workshop, the 2-day workshop, is coming to Dubai. He's already been there. He was there last year, and he conducted the workshop. Now we're coming with Gaia. So Dr. David Alleman will be joining us for this workshop. I'll be conducting most of the workshop, and Dr. David Alleman will be conducting lesson number 4, which is the most difficult one. And we'll be coming this October. The exact dates will be shared, but just for those who want to register right now, so we are basically giving you this particular thing. uh, it's a set. It's a set of beautiful instruments. It will be only for those who registered today, or intend to register today. So I'll just share the picture and then I answer. So can you see this? The set of this is not the original LMArt, but inspired LMArt instruments, where I use it personally, and we'll be giving to the first 10 participants who are joining us. I will now answer the questions. Just give me a second. I need to open the chat. Yeah. So the question is, decoupling with time after we will use bonding agent or direct based composite on it. Decoupling with time is after the bonding agent. Okay. Universal bond from 3M and Ivoclar is for biometric restorations, and no, neither of them. Universal bond from 3M is 7th generation, which has the prime and the bonding agent together. So when you have these particular components together, so there will be the prime is basically hydrophilic and the bond is hydrophobic. So when you have the hydrophilic and the hydrophobic component mixed in one bottle, there'll be certain areas which will get the hydrophilic part and certain areas which will not get. So the bonding will be varying. Similarly, Ioclare has a two bottle system, but it's not that good. So we basically use the gold standard bonding agents, which are only two right now in the world. That is Clearfill SE, or Clearfill, the one with the fluoride. We don't have it in the country in India. And the second one is Optimon FL. These are the only two bonding agents which has gold standard. What do you mean by gold standard is that they have shown the same kind of results every time. So when there's a research to be done, they use gold standard materials because they know that the bonding agent will work the same. So there'll be a constant result from that end, and they have given amazing results. Okay. uh, so difference between deep margin elevation and image, there's a major difference. Deep margin elevation is that if you have a proximal cavity which is going around 3 millimeters, 4 millimeters below the gum level. So in biomimetic, or in my case, I don't do crown landing procedures. I isolate, as you saw in my presentation as well. I just isolate them, and with isolation itself you can start the filling. The isolation is so amazing that you don't require to do the crown landing, because if you do crown landing you have to wait for a month's time for you to do the procedure. So deep margin elevation is basically raising the height, as whereas immediate ending sealing is covering the whole surface with resin coat and the bonding agent. Any ribbon alternative, there is one called as INOD, which is available in Dubai as well, if I'm not wrong. So you can use that. Any more doubts anybody has? I hope everybody understood whatever little time we had, because I was told 1 hour and now we are reaching 2 hours. So I know it was a very lengthy lecture. I'm thankful for you guys stayed with me. If you have any more doubts, I'm here. Please ask me. Okay, I guess nobody has a doubt. I'll wait for a minute more. Thank you. Thank you to all of you, not just me. I mean, and thanks to Gaia. They organized this whole thing. And I hope it was helpful to you guys. Also, anybody who wants to register for the workshop, please contact Gaia. They'll be the one who will be managing the entire thing. I thank all of you. It was a pleasant thing to meet you guys from a different part of the world. And let's stay bonded. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the session. Thanks to all of you who have stayed back so late for attending the beautiful one. Those who are interested in the course can
Ma'am, we can't hear you. Hello. I think Dr.
Sir, you can hear us now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for the session. It was a very beautiful one, and thanks to all the doctors who had stayed back for so late. I know it's pretty late, and it's a working day. And thanks to you also, sir. I know it's very late for you. In India, it's now 12 o'clock. It's past 12 now. And anybody who's interested in the course can contact us via Instagram, Facebook, or email or WhatsApp. We will be giving them the details of the course. Yes, sir. Thank you
Also,
so much.
please, if you could, we'll be posting a few screenshots on Instagram. So please share your comments. How did you like it? If you like the workshop, the webinar or not. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you.